GMOs are good. According to the USDA, GMO seeds are used to plant over 90% of all maize, cotton, and soy grown in the United States. And as much as 80% of foods in supermarkets contain ingredients that come from genetically modified crops. Why is GMO information relevant to you? GMOs are in many of the foods we buy and consume daily. As such, we should all have the knowledge required to make educated decisions on our purchases and consumption. Why am I able to speak on GMOs? What makes me a credible source? I am a thorough researcher of GMOs and have been for about 5 years now. I'm an experienced gardener who has some experience with GMO crops. I am also an aspiring botanist currently pursuing my 4-year degree in botany. GMOs are more beneficial for people and the environment than they are harmful. This is a statement that I plan to prove to you today through the use of basic GMO information, discussion on the benefits of GMOs in terms of insect, pest, and herbicide resistance, increased ability to withstand environmental conditions, and increased nutritional benefit, along with discussion on whether or not GMOs cause serious medical issues and whether or not they increase potential of allergies and allergic reactions. Let's begin with some basic information on GMOs. The abbreviation GMO stands for genetically modified organism. The creation of GMO is done using recombinant DNA technology, which alters the genetic machinery of such living organisms as animals, plants, and microorganisms. However, currently the only approved GMOs for food use are plants. This means that my presentation will be pertaining to only GMOs that are plants or crops, not to animals or humans or microorganisms. There is currently a genetically modified salmon up for FDA approval, but it is not known whether or not that salmon will be approved yet. Let's begin with insect, pest, and herbicide resistance. This is one of the most major uses of GMOs. It's one of the most major types of them. The Bacillus thuringiensis, or BT bacteria, is a prominent insecticide use. Bacillus thuringiensis occurs naturally in soil, and when used in the production of GMOs, it causes a protein release in the GMO crop, which will fend off any insects attempting to eat or feed on it. To the left here, to the right here, you can see a visual representation of how this is done. So there is an insecticide gene being created using recombinant DNA technology, where the DNA of the crop itself has a piece of BT bacteria DNA inserted into it, which will then produce plant cells that are naturally insecticidal. These same cells will later be used for plant propagation, and those plants will have a natural insecticide built into them, which will allow them to fend off insects. In the case of this visual, it shows the insects dying. Insect, pest, and herbicide-resistant GMOs are known to cause lesser quantities of insecticides and pesticides needing use, meaning less insecticide and pesticide chemicals are released into the atmosphere. This is beneficial because both are major producers of greenhouse gases, which are, as we all know, harmful to our environment. This same thing leads to lesser fuel and machine usage, meaning an even lesser quantity of greenhouse gases being released. The lesser amount of fuel and machine usage leads to a often lesser amount of labor being required, which can sometimes decrease the overall cost of the crop, the produce, which can be passed on to consumers if stores and farmers actually pass on the benefit. A 2014 analysis of 147 studies found that GMO technology has reduced chemical pesticide use by 37% and increased crop yields by 22%. These increased yields are due to a lesser amount of insects, pests, and weeds affecting plant growth and production. In the case of herbicide resistance specifically, no-till farming is now a potential, which means that there will be increased soil fertility by the soil not needing to be tilled and thus not releasing its nutrients into the atmosphere, something that can and often does occur during the tilling process. GMOs can also be made to withstand environmental conditions. Some environmental conditions are temperature, humidity, precipitation, sunlight, and water and air quality. There are a few limitations to this type of GMO, though there are some that apply. An increasingly common form of this GMO are those that are resistant to droughts, as droughts are ever increasing in our world due to current global states of warming and climate change in general, along with natural weather patterns. There is great potential for GMOs made to grow in typically unfavorable or incompetent conditions in soil, meaning increasingly bad environmental conditions for normal farming practices, normal non-GMO farming practices, or soil that is not very fertile and does not naturally hold a large amount of nutrients, which plants do need to grow and produce good product for consumers like us to consume. GMOs can also be used to increase nutritional benefit. This is majorly beneficial for regions with malnutrition, as a lesser amount of the same product in a increased nutritional benefit GMO will give a better nutritional benefit to them. They will be able to maintain their health more easily for a lesser cost on a lesser quantity of food. One example of this is a form of African corn used modified to contain 2 times as much folate, 6 times as much vitamin C, and 169 times as much beta carotene. Another great example is golden rice, which is rich in beta carotene and was developed to prevent blindness in regions that have diets chronically deficient in vitamin A. Now, I know not everyone agrees with me on this topic, and many people have concerns for this. So I'm going to address all the major prominent concerns in the GMO discussion. First, there are major concerns on serious mental illnesses. One of these is cancer. A lot of this stems from an early study on mice which linked GMO intake to a higher risk of tumors and early death. However, this same study was later redacted due to its poor design. Currently, there are no credible sources linking cancer to GMO consumption, a statement which is supported by the American Cancer Society. Another major medical condition, medical issue, is organ failure. Various anti-GMO organizations, one of which is the Institute for Responsible Technology, or IRT, have released studies claiming GMOs are toxic and lead to untreatable, deadly failure of various organs. These same studies were mainly produced in the early days of GMOs. However, they are still sometimes produced today, and those early studies are often cited today in GMO discussions, though all of them have been disproven by credible colleges, governments, and scientific organizations dedicating time and money to replicating and investigating those same claims. As of today, there are no viable claims, no viable studies for this connection. So it is currently not believed that there is any link between organ failure and GMO consumption. There is also an allergy concern. The general view is that the transfer of genetic data causes increased allergic reactions. This would occur in foods that one is not allergic to. For example, there was a GM soybean crop which used DNA from Brazil nuts and caused people to have reactions to the genetically modified soybeans, even though their only actual allergy to the two was to Brazil nuts, not soybeans. Such reactions can occur, but they are extremely uncommon. This is due to thorough testing of GMOs being required prior to any release for public use. If such a case does occur, there are prompt recalls. This can be seen in the genetically modified soybean example, where all the products were promptly recalled and the entire strain was pulled from production in both factories where the GM soybean was already being used to produce more food, and in the fields where the crops were still being grown. This GM soybean is no longer sold or produced anywhere. In conclusion, insect and pest-resistant GMOs decrease insecticide and pesticide use, effectively decreasing their harmful environmental footprint. Herbicide GMOs can increase soil fertility through lack of tilling. GMOs can be made to withstand environmental conditions such as drought. GMOs with increased nutritional benefit can decrease the effects of malnutrition. And GMOs can be used to decrease vitamin deficient blindness. Here you will see my list of references. There are several references here. However, only 5 of them were used for the information itself. 2 of these references were strictly for photo use. That is the end of my presentation. I hope I have brought some insight to your opinion on GMOs and have let you feel a little bit more at ease on the topic, more willing to consume GMOs and actually defend them in further talks that you may experience with people.